Today we're going to talk about the tangent function. Just like the sine and cosine function, the coefficients are not changing. A is still going to be in front of tangent, B is still in front of the x, and C is being added to the bx. Now first let's look at the basic shape of our tangent curve, and remember this is only one cycle. The first thing we're going to start off with are these vertical lines. These are called vertical asymptotes. These vertical asymptotes are acting as boundaries, so they don't. The tangent function's not going to touch or cross the vertical asymptotes. And then we have the tangent curve that is right in between it, and it's going to go up and down. And notice where it crosses the x-axis, in this case is at the origin. Where it crosses the x-axis is always going to be halfway between your two vertical asymptotes. As far as graphing the tangent function, we're going to need three things. The first thing is the period. In order to find the period, it's going to be pi over b. The phase shift, so how it's being shifted left to right, is going to be negative c over b. And the phase shift is going to tell us where it hits, the x-axis. So the phase shift is going to tell us where it crosses the x-axis. And then the last thing is our interval. Our interval is going to be between negative pi over 2, then we have bx plus c, and then positive pi over 2. So these are the three main things that we're going to find in order to graph. So notice we do not need to find the amplitude, and we don't have to find 5 points. This is all the information we need. Now, our a value used to tell us the direction of our curve, and it's going to do the same thing for tangent. If I have a positive a, your graph is going to go up. If I have a negative a, my graph is going to go down. Alright, let's look at our first example. So I didn't have my notes, so make sure you copy this new one down. So y equals 3 times the tangent of x minus pi. Now the first thing we're going to find is the period. The period is pi over b. So if I take a look, my b value is always in front of my x. So in this case my b value is 1. So I have pi over 1, which reduces to pi. The next thing we're going to find is our phase shift. It's negative c over b. Our c value is whatever's being added or subtracted to your bx value. So in this case it's going to be negative, my c is negative pi, and we just said my b value was 1. So negative negative becomes positive pi. So this, it's going to cross the x-axis at pi. That's where it's going to cross the x-axis. Now the last thing we need to find is our interval. And we're going to start between negative pi over 2, take what's inside the parentheses, and positive pi over 2. So we need to get x by itself, so we're going to add pi to both sides. So I add pi to both sides, and I'm going to get pi over 2, and then I'm going to get 3 pi over 2. So in this case, these 2 points are going to be my vertical asymptotes. Alright, now we're ready to graph everything. So the first thing we're going to do is label our vertical asymptotes. So I'm going to draw, they're both positive in this case. So I'm going to draw my first one is pi over 2. And then my second one we said was going to be 3 pi over 2. Now remember we got our phase shift to be pi over 2. Oh, sorry. Our phase shift was pi. So that means it's going to cross the x-axis, and remember it's always right in the middle of our two vertical asymptotes. So I'm going to label pi. Now the last thing we have to figure out is our graph going to go up or down. Well, in this case my a value was 3, so it's positive, so that means my graph is going to go up. So as I work left to right, I'm going to go up. Draw it up. and then that would be our final answer. Alright, let's take a look at one more example. Again, it's a different example, so make sure you write it down. So it's y equals -1/2 tangent of 3 pi x. So the first thing we're going to figure out is the period. So it's going to be pi over b. Again, the b value is in front of the x. So notice 3 pi is my b. So it's going to be pi over 3 pi. So the pi's are going to cancel out, so I'm left with the period is going to be 1/3. The next thing we're going to find is our phase shifts. It's going to tell us where it crosses the x-axis, so it's -c over b. Now notice nothing's being added or subtracted to my bx, so that means my c value in this case is 0 over, we just said my b was 3 pi. Well, 0 divided by anything is going to stay 0. So in this case, it's going to cross the x-axis at 0. So I'm just going to make a note of that. And then our interval, we're going to start between -pi/2, take what's inside the parentheses, and +pi over 2. Now in order to get rid of this 3 pi, you're going to divide by 3 pi, or we can take both sides and simply multiply by the reciprocal, which would be 1 over 3 pi. So if I do that, the pi's are going to cancel, and I'm left with -1/6. I have an x in the middle, the pi's cancel again, and I have 1 over 6. So in this case, -1/6 and +1/6 are going to be my two vertical asymptotes. Alright, so let's graph this last one. So in this case, we said it's going to cross the x. Our phase shift was 0. So it's going to cross the x-axis at 0. And then our two asymptotes were -1/6 and then +1/6. So I'm going to label those, have dotted lines going through those points. And then in this case, my a value was -1/2. So since it was negative, that means as I go left to right, the graph is going to go down. So it should look like this. And that will be our final answer. Again, make sure you make note of any questions that you have, and I'll make sure I go or answer those questions at the beginning of class.